Unpacking standards. So today I'll unpack standard literacy RL 4.2, which is to determine a theme of a story, drama, or poem from details in the text and to summarize the text. So why is it important to unpack standards? Well, in order for students to be successful, we need to be able to unpack standards and analyze what we need to teach them and what content they need to master. It's not so easy to do, as the standards are often have a lot packed into a very small space. So in order for teachers to truly understand what they need to do, they need to break it down into some simple statements and then look at what needs to be done. And it's important for teachers to remember that these statements are not created or written in a hierarchical method, and you can't teach one standard in isolation from the others, that there's often an interplay between the standards. So, how to unpack a standard? By following these steps, you can gain a clearer insight in what is expected of students and therefore plan your instruction and activities to meet the students' needs. So first of all, you need to identify the verbs. You can circle them. Second, you identify nouns or noun phrases, especially recurring ones, and you can underline them. Third is you identify qualifiers like adjectives and adverbs. You can highlight them. Then you break the standard down into separate statements using the verbs, nouns, and quantifiers. You can also align the standard statements with Bloom's taxonomy to think about the level of thinking that is required. And then you develop instruction groups and activities to assist students in mastering standards. So let's look again at the standard. Okay, so first of all, we identify the verbs, which are determine and summarize. Then we start looking at the nouns. So it asks us to identify the theme, but the theme of a story, drama, or poem. Okay, and we need to use details from the text. And finally, we need to summarize the whole text. Okay, so step 4, we've broken down statements. We've got determine the theme of the story from details in the text. Then the same for the drama, same for the poem, and also we need to summarize the text. So now we need to identify the big ideas or essential questions in order to plan our instruction. So here are some of the essential questions that I've identified for this standard. First of all, what is the theme of the story? Okay, or the poem or drama? What details support your identification of the theme? So the students need to find details in the text. What are some of the important events? So we're looking at a narrative, so important events or characters. And what do the characters learn from these events? What can we learn from the events? And what can we learn from the characters? So this is an important part of identifying the theme. Then, in order to do this, we need to identify the elements. So poems, narratives, and dramas, they all have similar elements, but some of them have special elements that are unique. For example, a poem and a narrative can have overlapping elements, but we're going to be looking just at narratives in this presentation. So a narrative has a number of key elements. It's characters, setting, there's a conflict or problem, there's some sort of rising action to make the story more exciting. Then there's a climax, which is the most exciting point in the story. Then there's falling action that normally happens after the problem's been solved, and then the end of the story with a resolution, what happens to the characters in the end. Okay, in order for students to successfully be able to identify the theme, they need to be able to know what these different elements of the narrative are. Okay, so, and they need to be able to analyze the elements. So each of these elements contribute to the theme of the story, but in grade 4, we need to focus on helping the students at that age level identify the really important elements. So we focus on the events and the characters and what they learn. It's also important to show that ability to use and identify evidence to make an argument is an important part of the grade 4 reading expectations and competencies. So the important part of identifying the theme and then summarizing it is being able to break down the main events, okay? And you can have these questions below to help them do that. Then also we can do the same with the character, and we have a number of questions here to help the student identify the character. This can be used in combination with making annotations on the text and using those annotations on a graphic organizer, which we'll look at just now. So to start off, to get the students comfortable with this, once they've gained the prior skills of being able to identify the main events of the story and identify the character traits, they're now ready to start looking at the theme. Okay, and the first part we do here is we find a text that is appropriate to grade level, so between 700 and 800 Lexile level, and we model students how to do this for the students. Okay, so here is a graphic organizer that we use in conjunction with the text, and we look at the different parts of the story, and the students make their notes. This will also help them then write their summary. Okay, then once the students have done that, they can go into small guided groups and also work on independent practice time. So in order to assess the standard, you can use a rubric such as this, where it asks them, it assesses their ability to identify the character and the events, the theme, and write a summary. In order to help students make progress towards mastery of the standard and develop proficiency, first of all, you model identifying the theme and summarizing text. Then you provide small guided group instruction. Then students can work in small groups and pairs and give themselves peer assessment. The whole time you should be using the rubric. And then at the end, you can give them a summative assessment where you provide them with the rubric and graphic organizer, and you use the rubric to assess whether they have now met standards. It's also important to modify the standards. So students that should be assigned texts that are appropriate to the current reading or level. So in classes, you often have students that are reading below grade level and reading above grade level. You want to give them a text that is appropriately challenging. Students struggling with prior knowledge should be given remediation or be retaught where there are gaps. Students that can only work online or through digital devices, you can assign the task through Google Docs. And students with learning disabilities might be given more time or might be given additional support or separate space to work in. Here are my sources.